Today's show is sponsored by Panoptica. Panoptica, Cisco's cloud application security solution, provides end-to-end lifecycle protection for cloud-native application environments. Panoptica empowers organizations to safeguard their APIs, serverless functions, containers, and Kubernetes environments. Panoptica ensures comprehensive cloud security, compliance, monitoring, at scale, offering deep visibility, contextual risk assessments, and actionable remediation insights for all your cloud assets. To get more information, go to Panoptica's website, panoptica.app. That's Panoptica's website, panoptica.app.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. 2024 is upon us. Hopefully everybody had a good, happy new year. Hopefully everybody had a good, relaxing break. It's been good for Aaron and I to get away for a week or so. Aaron got a chance to get down to south of the border, I believe Mexico, and out to see some college football, got to see some of the playoff football. I had a chance to do some skiing. So both of us had a chance to spend a lot of time with family, a lot of time relaxing, and we appreciate you allowing us a little bit of time to have a break from doing the shows every week. So, but excited for 2024. As we mentioned, there'll be some immediate changes. There'll be some small, subtle changes. I am kicking off this week. We will not be doing Cloud News of the Week every time to start the show. We're probably just going to do somewhat of a recap of what the show is going to be about. We're going to do Cloud News of the Month. We're going to try and do that the first show of every month, whether it's a Sunday or a Wednesday show. So we'll be doing that. January, as most of you know, unless you're a sort of a brand new listener to the show, which if you are, welcome. January is typically one of the slower months of the year. People are coming back from vacation. They are, just kind of getting into the year. They're trying to figure out their budgets. They're trying to figure out their goals. So not a lot of news in terms of what happens. But if anything breaking happens, obviously we'll cover that. But typically what we do in January is we do what we call sort of look-ahead shows. So we kick off some shows. We bring on some guests who, are not getting into sort of the specifics as we often do in shows, but really kind of try to look a little further out at, the bigger picture of what's going on. And this week, very excited, friend of the show, Mark Hinkle, who has been on a number of times. It's been a little while since we had Mark on. Mark is somebody who has oftentimes been kind of a pioneer in a number of things. He's been, sort of forefront of a lot of things open source. He's had a number of important roles in open source foundations, the Apache Foundation and some others. Was in the early days of cloud computing, was actually part of cloud.com. Mark has also been, startup founder, but he has been, for the last year or so, basically dedicated himself to really changing the way that he does work and how AI can help him with that. And has not only made it, part of his everyday work, but also part of the work that he does from a day-to-day perspective. So really, we're going to dig into kind of how his learnings over the last year sort of, tip of the spear in terms of how AI can help you from a productivity perspective. What are some of the tools that can really help you with that? What are some of the pitfalls to watch out for? What are some of the, maybe the rumors and concerns out there and how to handle those things? So we're going to dive into all that with Mark right after the break. Are you getting pressure from finance to justify or reduce your cloud bill? CloudZero is the only cloud cost platform loved by engineers and trusted by finance. CloudZero can identify unused, idle, or over-provisioned resources, alert you to spend anomalies, and organize 100% of your spend into a framework that mirrors your business structure, like cost per customer, product feature, or team. It's the most powerful platform ever built to provide accurate, granular visibility into your total cloud spend without the typical pitfalls of legacy cloud cost management tools like endless tagging or clunky Kubernetes support. Manage cost, optimize development, and maximize profit, all in one platform. Join companies like Rapid7, Drift, and SeatGeek by visiting cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started. That's cloudzero.com/cloudcast. Visit today to experience immediate and ongoing savings on your cloud bill. And we're back. And Aaron, Happy New Year. Hope you're doing well. How were all the trips? How were the holidays? How's the family?
Fantastic as always. It's always good to get away for a little bit.
You got some sun. You got to enjoy a little bit south of the border.
Exactly. A little bit of south of the border, a little bit of college football. It's all good.
There you go. Well, listen, as we've done for a number of years, we're going to kick off 2024 with what we call our look ahead shows. So for those of you that are new to the podcast, these are, we try and take sort of a big topic, a topic that we think everybody's going to be somewhat interested in, and not necessarily dive deep into certain things, but sort of look ahead as to, where might this go? What are some things that you might be thinking about as you think about the bigger picture for the year? And very, very excited to bring an old friend back from the show, a friend who we've not only has been kind of a mentor to Aaron and I around the Raleigh area, but somebody who has seen some things and is very, very active in this space. So very excited to bring back Mark Hinkle, founder and CEO of Peripety Labs. Mark, welcome back to the show. And man, it's been a little while. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you guys too. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into, we're gonna dive into. You have been heavily involved with a lot of interesting things around AI, especially around productivity around it. But for folks that may not know you, you've been on the show a couple times before, but it's been way too long. Give folks a little bit of background, and then give us a sense of what you're working on these days.
Yeah, so I've spent the last 25 years as a tech executive in emerging tech, and sort of my most recent gigs where I was CEO and co-founder of a venture-backed company called TriggerMesh. We did cloud native integration. Before that, I was at the Linux Foundation, where I was the VP of marketing and ran the Node.js Foundation. And before that, I was one of the early cloud folks at cloud.com, where I guess I worked with Aaron directly for a while after we were acquired by Citrix. But so yeah, I've done a lot of stuff early on in the adoption curve, a lot around open source. And now my focus is really in artificial intelligence. And it's been a load of fun. I mean, I've watched machine learning, and I knew how that worked, and I knew how, all the infrastructure worked. But when things became real last year with ChatGPT, I really decided to buckle down and up my game. And so, if you're claiming you have generative AI experience, unless you're like a machine learning science researcher or a data scientist who's been directly in that space, a year's worth of Gen AI experience is like a decade these days. So I'm not an expert. I just play one on the internet.
There you go. Well, so Mark, that's a great point to kind of start on our topics too, because I think we did an AI topic look ahead show the last couple of years, but they always felt a little speculative, if you will. And then, as you mentioned, ChatGPT comes out, and then pretty much every organization today is probably thinking about it in some way, shape, or form. But here's the thing. I don't think many still are completely wrapping their heads around where to focus. And so, if you're a business leader today, where are you focusing your priorities on in terms of how to take advantage of AI? What are good ways to improve the business?
Yeah. So, the thing is that really the productivity boost is just phenomenal for a lot of things. Not everything, but if you're looking at a certain cross section, sales and marketing, software development, and research and development all seem to get a big boost from it. So if you do any of those things, there's great proven tools like GitHub Copilot for writing code, and there's other ones out there, but GitHub Copilot, they have really good stats on, making your developers a lot more productive. Marketing. I taught a course for a company called Creative Live that's owned by Fiverr, and I had to come up with a name for it. And I started thinking about it, and it's like my aspirations were to be a 10x marketer. Like in the software world, we talk about the 10x programmer who's that good at everything. And now you start putting these kind of tools in the hands of marketers for content creation and sentiment analysis and doing all these sort of tasks, sales as well. You can really get some boosts. And so that's where I would look at as just the opportunity in the near term is productivity. I think that starts to translate into revenue very shortly. So, if you look like PwC did a survey, I think earlier in 2023, and of those that were using AI, they saw, 52% of the executives saw boosted productivity, and 54% saw increase in revenue. Now that's a pretty wide swath, but those kind of results in the nascent changing world of AI were pretty impressive. And for me personally, I mean, I am at least 3 or 4 times more productive than I was last year, and my aspiration is 10x. I mean, it depends on the task, but so much of the things that I do, just digesting information. I was a terrible student. I was like the, Blutowski of the University of Pittsburgh, if you are an Animal House fan, and just terrible. And as I get older, I really like to learn, and I've read a lot of papers, but, archive.org, hosted by Cornell, there's more AI papers published daily than there have been in years on this topic. There are like 8 new papers come out every day, and some of it's interesting, but you can't go through that stuff. But if you see something catches your eye, you can summarize it into some bullet points before you start down the rabbit hole of reading, some 30-page paper on chain of thought prompting for AI and how it gets better results, or insert your esoteric, deeply technical topic here. But that kind of stuff is the productivity, and then the revenue that you can generate. So whether it's, I've had really good luck doing demand gen with it, just because you can not just crank out more content, but crank out better content. Like, it's to do something that's, there's a lot of garbage on the internet, and there always has been. And generative AI has, increased that. It's like a garbage strike in New York in the summer. It's just terrible. But if you know what you're doing, you can create some really interesting stuff really quickly, and use some tooling to help connect your potential customers with your companies. And those are the kind of things I've helped, some, companies we know, big companies that do containers, things like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems like, I think we're going to see a lot of companies who, have some, big kind of grand, moonshot kind of things. You're almost saying, like, look, don't get too hung up in, some of the people who are like, hey, if this isn't big, it's like get started quickly, find the stuff, because there's going to be a learning curve to it. I'm curious, as you've been sort of living this space, because you've essentially built the whole business around not only helping to deliver services with AI, but also kind of using it to do it. What does your learning curve sort of look like over the last year or two? What are some of the milestones that you can kind of remember in terms of, well, let me find tools, let me figure some stuff out, let me get frustrated, let me get better at it. What are some of the things that you can remember?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things that are really tough to keep up with. Is everything changes. So the speed of innovation and where we're at has been so fast that a lot of tools, that there's very few tools that I would say are the same choices I would have made earlier this year. I mean, I'm a big fan of the technology of OpenAI, but after the firing and rehiring of the CEO within a week, you wonder, is there some craziness over there? So, I might have said, hey, OpenAI would be the way to go, but maybe if you're worried about stability, you do something with Microsoft Azure AI, because it's the same underlying model. But that's sort of foundational. I think that OpenAI's GPT-4 is the best out there. So that's sort of when GPT-4 came out and they started to add, for desktop productivity, plugins were a game changer. Web browsing was a game changer. The other big thing I think that happened is, and it's twofold. The first thing was LangChain. And, I think it's a very interesting open source project, but it was the first sort of middleware for building AI applications. And I don't know if you saw their initial website, but it was just a text-based website just a few months after Harrison launched LangChain. And now, it's sort of a foundational thing. But then Llama Guard comes out, and that's a little bit of, Llama Index comes out, and that's, has some overlap. But I believe it's still under one of the Facebook/Meta pseudo licenses where there's some restrictions that keep it from being truly open source. But those two things are like foundational, is large language models that are capable and sort of middleware to create that, amalgamation of services. And now you start seeing these small language models is probably the biggest third bullet, I would say, is, Mistral, Mixtral, which is a mixture of experts model, sort of a amalgamation of 8 personalities in one model, or 8 just being an arbitrary number. And then you see Microsoft V and Gemini, and all of these small language models are going to be able to run on, like Gemini, they have and Phi are small enough to run on cell phones. So that's going to be interesting too. And then I just saw last week, NeuroIPS is the big researchers conference for artificial intelligence, and all of the models I've mentioned so far were GPT based, so transformers. This new one is based on a little bit different architecture and has a more efficient resource footprint. So I think these sort of, stepping back a bit, I think small models are going to be part of the fabric. And what's going to happen is you're going to have this enterprise GPT. So that's going to be your sort of general purpose large language model that does a lot of stuff, like, helps you with your email and generates web copy and writes code. And then you're going to see these narrow AIs, or these small language models. And a narrow AI may not be small. It just may be, the context may be bounded of the situation. So it may be a financial model, or it may be a medical model, or something like that. So I think that you're going to have these sort of LangChain conversation routers in the front, this AI middleware. And I think there's going to be more of that coming. And it's going to be able to route to different models, and it's going to do something called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, where it pulls data from your traditional data sources like your data lakes, your databases, things like that, and combines it into some well-formed output, which is sort of what we think might be going on behind the scenes in ChatGPT right now, even with DALL-E as a separate model than GPT-4, than GPT-3, but it may be even more bifurcated than that.
So, Mark, let me ask you this, because in covering all of those technologies too, I kind of thinking about this breakdown, and you having a very strong open source background. What's your thoughts on the future of like closed source SaaS offerings like an OpenAI versus a fully open source, large language model like even though it's a weird license like a Llama 2, or like a full, like a Mistral or something else like that? Put your open source hat on for a second. This is kind of software all over again. Where do you think it goes? And also, is the openness of the open source, in like in the weights and the testing and all of that other stuff?
Yeah.
Right? What's your thoughts there, man?
So I, for a few years, sort of was frustrated with open source because it's been a hard way for companies to make their numbers. So, HashiCorp went public, their stock took a little bit of a hit, and they changed their license. Other companies have changed their licenses to sort of these commercial open licenses, but they're not technically open source. But I think that it has to be open, that the models become increasingly open. Like I think though, to summarize what you're asking, Aaron, is I think open source is important for a couple reasons. Is A, it's a good way to start to mitigate the fear of AI, which is one of the biggest, detractors right now. Two is that I think that in the long term, just like broadband access, compute, storage, all these things commoditize. I think
Let me kind of explore that path a little bit. You mentioned early on that you're seeing even just in your work 3x productivity, and you've got some goals to get higher than that. How have you been thinking about kind of the difference between when you should be experimenting and not really thinking about the results so much? How long do you experiment with things versus when do you kind of go, okay, it's good enough, now let me start measuring the improvement, because I can only spend so much time on experimenting. Like how are you kind of thinking about that balance?
So for me, I've been lucky because I've been an early adopter, so I have a lot more time to experiment and still be able to maintain a viable business. But I think for the rest of the world that's sort of playing catch up there, is I published a newsletter called the Artificially Intelligent Enterprise, and a couple issues back I was said really thinking about how you go about it. And what I said was, first thing you do is look at the mundane tasks. And if you look at a mundane task that requires a lot of text manipulation, so doing reports, summaries, one of the biggest time savers, and you're not broadcasting screens for this, but I use an AI note taker, and it's super good. It takes notes, assigns action items. When I do case studies, I use the note taker because it instantly matches up the transcript with the video, allows it to be searchable, gives me summaries and things like that. And it's cuts my work down a lot. You still spend a lot of time editing, but you're not spending so much time waiting on like in the olden days, which weren't that far back, before things like Otter AI, we would send off, MP3s of meetings and get meeting notes transcribed. And now it's instantaneous. Those kind of things are time saving on the back and forth, the human automation, that kind of thing. So I would look, and it really depends. So if you're, if you're one of the three places that I just talked about earlier, like marketing, sales, software developers, if I was a software developer and I've never written good code, I would never be, I'm an Apache committer, but I'm not a coder per se. Writing subroutines that are repetitive, that should be off the table. You should be more of a architect and less of a coder in the future. And you still need to understand how it works. You can't just rely on it, but it's pretty darn good. And you can really focus on the things we never had time to focus on, like improving efficiency and bottlenecks, rather than just, we all three of us have worked in software. You know how bad a 1.0 version usually is, and it's just a result of somebody putting a line in the sand and say, we don't have enough time to do these things we obviously need to do. So that's those two areas. And then the third is just research and development. In so many cases is not so much that you're conducting experiments, but you're sifting through data and doing pattern matching. So I think it was IDC just had a thing on data, and 91% of the data in the enterprise is unstructured. And I want to say somewhere around 50% of that is only used once and never used again. So we have this treasure trove of data that could give us customer insights, could give us production insights, could give us sales insights. And after the quarter's done, a lot of times we never look at that data again after we look at our TPS reports. But, those kinds of opportunities where we can put basically a fleet of business analysts in well-defined domains and let it at that data and do those kind of things. And when I say business analysts, I'm talking about business analysts that are large language models doing that work, not business analysts that eat and breathe and sleep.
So, Mark, I think you highlighted a big potential misconception there, and that is, AI is going to come for all of us, and AI is going to take all of our jobs. And you're kind of, recommending a complementary, and it making things easier and being additive, and so that's certainly a misconception that you helped with there. But what are some of the other biggest misconceptions you're seeing across the industry right now? Is it concerns and job fear? Is it security? Is it data privacy, anti-patterns? Tell everyone a little bit about where you think the biggest misconceptions are right now.
So let's start with the fear of jobs, because it's a real fear, because it's going to impact, depending on whose research you look at, 300 million jobs in the next 2 years. And they also, if you look at the World Economic Forum, I believe they're forecasting somewhere, and the numbers I think just changed, like 75 million jobs will be lost to AI, but 115 million will be gained. It was, I think, something like 72 and 95, but people are more bullish on job creation from think tanks and stuff like that right now. But I would go back to a couple examples. Is back in the 1800s, 90% of the population had something to do with agriculture. We're an agrarian society. Today, we have 9% of the U.S. Workforce is related to food production, and we have more food than ever before. It's cheaper than before because of things like the tractor and other breakthroughs and the growing of crops. After every big tech boom, we've seen a increase in productivity. So the electric motor, I think, was in the 1920s, and then the personal computer are two of the big. What happens is there's disruption, so we reshuffle the deck, and that's sort of painful, but shortly thereafter, we had a big boom in productivity. So on that front, I think that AI is going to shuffle the deck as far as jobs, but I think that those jobs, some of the things I mentioned that I did earlier is, all that mundane stuff gets off my plate, and I can do deeper, thoughtful work than I could without it. And I hope that's the case for many people. Then the other one that you mentioned, it is right in there as security, Aaron, because there's a couple reasons that it is. And it's funny because I just did a interview this morning on this. We were talking, it was specifically about security. And I am by no way, shape, or form a security expert. But when you're done infrastructure this long, you come at it from the side a little bit. And I look at the number one thing that I think people are worried about and should be worried about is data leakage. So, I'm at my job and I realize that I can be a lot more productive with ChatGPT. And maybe I won't share with my employer I'm doing that, and they're just going to think I'm a superstar. And their employer may have a policy that forbids that, and say they work at a, law firm or a financial place or somewhere where client privacy is important. And those folks are cutting and pasting private data into ChatGPT and creating reports and doing other kinds of research. And while technically that data should not become part of the model, that comes with training data. If you're using ChatGPT Plus, you can opt in and out of sharing your data. I don't know if you can with the regular ChatGPT, but if you're sharing the training data, it's using the information that you're putting in to better improve the model. And it's supposed to be amalgamated in there, like cement, like the little stones in cement that you couldn't, once it's cemented in there. They're not supposed to come out.
We've always seen as you mentioned, you've been around a bunch of technology trends. We've both been around a bunch of technology trends. There's always the fascination with technology, and then there's the how do we make this work in a bigger context, which always requires getting teams aligned right, organizations right, all this sort of the soft skills, the people skills, and so forth. Have you, in the early days, have you seen anything yet where there's essentially like the DevOps of AI that kind of marries sort of the people and the technology yet, or just like big mistakes that you've seen how people organize themselves when this new productivity comes along?
2 points on that is, first one, you're right. The soft skills are super important. And when you look at some of these job reports, they're actually prioritizing creative thinking, analytical thinking, and systems thinking above the tech stuff. And then the interesting thing is I've been working with the guys. I did a hackathon with, a bunch of the original DevOps guys. So Patrick Dubois, John Willis, Damon Edwards, and then a lot of other folks who came at DevOps a little later. But those 3 were there on like day one. We talked about this sort of idea of AI for ops, and we're working on, I have a paper that I've half written on it, but I think that what's different about technology now is that it is no longer stacks. It's sort of webs. Some people like to say matrices because everything's a microservice. So there's more consideration of how you assimilate these more and more disparate systems. But that DevOps methodology of being more agile, no pun intended, and sharing information and doing a more automated approach to infrastructure is going to carry over there. I think it's just a new domain. So, in the old, as infrastructure folks, we're used to observability and monitoring and tracing and things like that. And we know how to write those tests. You write availability tests or synthetic transactions. Now, I think what happens is that we not only really need to look at software supply chain for AI, but also data supply chains. We have to map in the way that we deploy, test, and manage. So there's a whole set of machine learning tests that they use for these large language models. It's just not something that you've touched like you would if you were a DevOps engineer moving from company to company. It's just a brand new technology. But I think it all still applies. And I think it's, the thing that's nice is you're now going to have, a much smarter version of Alexa or Siri with you to help troubleshoot. You just got to make sure that you don't become too dependent on the AI and forget about your colleagues and partners.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. It's the value the business always has is what they know in the domain, not the stuff that everybody sort of has. So it'll be interesting to follow through on that stuff. Especially it's probably a wordly map somewhere in the making that will lay out what you should focus on, what gets commoditized, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, listen, man. Aaron, any last thoughts before we let Mr. Hinkle go and get back to building the AI machine?
No, I just wanted to say thanks, Mark, for your time, and definitely we're going to put some links to in the show notes for some of the things Mark has mentioned. So definitely check out the show notes for this one as well.
Thank you for helping us kick off the year. Excited about 2024. It looks like AI is probably going to be around for a little while, so that's it'll be a major topic for the year. But thanks for sharing experience, man. I think that we're going to try and be much more experience-based this year, much more things that are tangible for people kind of right away. So we appreciate you kicking off the year with a bang for us. And folks, if you like what you're hearing, please hit subscribe. Please tell your friend, help us grow the show. Send us feedback, show@thecloudcast.net. We're always looking for what you want to hear about, your ideas, your feedback, and so forth. And if you get a chance, give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcast. So for Aaron and for Mark, we'll wrap it up, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.